War costs lives, but it also costs money. Ukraine's economy is as ravaged as some of its cities, not least because the Russian naval blockade means it can't get wheat, one of its biggest exports, to customers abroad. While the IMF is projecting the Russian economy to contract by a significant 8.5% this year under the cosh of Western sanctions, the fund is projecting a 35% contraction for Ukraine in 2022. And many think this is likely to prove an underestimate. Janet Yellen, the US Treasury Secretary speaking in Brussels today, said Europe needs to provide considerably more financing for the Zelensky government to prosecute the fight back against Putin's forces.
Ukraine's immediate financing needs are significant, and I sincerely ask all our partners to join us in increasing their financial support to Ukraine.
Experts say that Ukraine doesn't just need Western weapons, but Western cash too, in order to feed and clothe and shelter its army and its general population. If Ukraine is to stay in this fight, we're told it's going to need copious economic resources. And yet that cash isn't arriving. The IMF estimates the Ukrainian government needs around $15 billion over the next 3 months, but only $5 billion has so far been delivered by the international community.
It's quite comforting, I think, from a Western perspective, to look and say, oh, but look, Ukraine's doing so well. I think it's thus very important for us to remember that Ukraine is not doing so well. We are looking at a catastrophic impact on the Ukrainian economy. And so to hide behind a desire to see in the military successes, which are at best a draw at this point, is to avoid the real question of, and how do we keep Ukraine surviving when its economy is currently in tatters?
But there are two economic issues facing Ukraine, not just survival, but reconstruction.
Day by day, American supplies arrived at the ports of Europe, raw materials for reconstruction. But for full reconstruction, a devastated continent called for more.
A group of high-profile economists recently proposed a new Marshall Plan for Ukraine, akin to what the US spent to help rebuild Europe after the Second World War. They suggested the price tag could be 200 to 500 billion euros. At the upper end, that would be more than double the size of Ukraine's entire economy last year. Indeed, it would be more than the actual Marshall Plan. Between 1948 and 1952, the US spent $13 billion on European reconstruction. That's equivalent to some 135 billion in today's money, or 130 billion euros.
This is the order of magnitude we should prepare ourselves for. These are the numbers which are given a very clear indication that Ukraine alone will not be able to handle this.
Does Europe have the will, or indeed the pockets, for such an investment, worth perhaps 3% of its economy, especially at a time of a cost of living crisis at home?
In Europe, leaders are very careful to listen to the public, and the public right now is very supportive of Ukrainians. You're right, Europe is not in a good shape, but so far we see broad support for reconstruction of Ukraine. But you're right, it's not going to be easy.
Reconstruction after a military invasion rarely is. To get into a position to rebuild economically, Ukraine, of course, first needs to ensure its survival.